4 years in prison.
Hernandez received 4 years out of a possible 54 years in prison.
I offer my apologies to my son and to his mother and her family.
Despite his son's plea that he receive no jail time at all.
And it's damaging my family, and we just need him. And I don't know what else to say other than not to send my father to jail.
Julian and his mother were in court today, but asked us not to take their pictures. Attorney Gloria Allred told me she agreed to represent the mother soon after hearing the story, which made national headlines.
I can't even imagine what that would be like. To have to undergo that pain for 13 years.
Picture this, a high school classroom buzzing with finishing touches, pencils tapping, classmates chatting, perfect chaos. The school counselor leans in and notices something odd, a social security number mismatch flashing red on their computer screen. A routine check meant nothing until suddenly everything changes. Because that quirk in the system wasn't just an error, it was a riptide pulling at the seams of a story that had vanished 13 years earlier, alone on a playground in Alabama. 5-year-old Julian Hernandez had been missing since 2002, taken from his mother's arms under the false promise of going to preschool. His father, Bobby Hernandez, just packed him into a car and drove straight into the kind of silence that blots out a child's name. No ransom, no contact, no trace, just an aching promise to never let anyone forget, except no one did. Until college application day. Because while technology falters, system checks do not, and that little glitch unlocked a nightmare no one expected. Suddenly, Julian's face was back, but he wasn't a child anymore. He was an 18-year-old navigating college forms, nervous, conflicted, haunted, and completely unaware he was a missing person. His counselor called the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Overnight, the FBI and Alabama authorities flooded into Cleveland, Ohio, seizing an apartment, an ID, a passport, and a father posing as a guardian. In one swift movement, a boy who had aged into a man was yanked back into the identity he never chose, shocked into learning that his whole childhood had been stolen. And his father, he didn't resist. He quietly admitted one thing as he was led out in handcuffs. It was me, I took him. But the real question wasn't just who, it was why. What kind of man abducts his own son for over a decade, living with him under false names, lying to everyone including his mother, all while keeping him in the shadows? And why does a teenager stand up for him? Julian, now Isaac or something else entirely, stood firm in court and said these two words, "I forgive him." The world recoiled, but that forgiveness didn't come without scars. In today's video, we will travel through the terror of a family robbed, the confusion of a teenager trapped in two worlds, the gut-wrenching courtroom showdown, and the unspoken toll of forgiveness when betrayal runs deeper than blood. This isn't just a missing child story. This is a story of identity theft, of psychological theft, of a life hijacked, and the slow crawl of truth that brought it all back. And it all began with a simple check on a computer. Imagine waking up every day thinking your name is Julian Otero, that your father is your father, that your life is normal. Homework, birthdays, pizza on Fridays, baseball in the summer. Now imagine discovering at 18 years old that your real name is Julian Hernandez. And your father, he's not just dad, he's your kidnapper. That's exactly what happened to Julian. Raised in Cleveland, Ohio under a fake identity, Julian lived what many would consider a quiet life. Good grades, no police record. He was even preparing for college, hopeful about his future. But what he didn't know was that his entire existence, every document, every school enrollment, every doctor's appointment, was built on a lie. When Julian submitted his college application, a red flag appeared. His social security number didn't match his name. A guidance counselor did some digging. Something didn't sit right. And when she contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a 13-year-old photo lit up her screen. Julian Hernandez, missing since 2002, age 5, last seen in Alabama. The counselor didn't tell Julian at first. She called the FBI. Agents confirmed everything. Fingerprints, records, photos. The boy in the Ohio high school was the same boy who had vanished in Alabama, abducted by his father during a custody dispute. Bobby Hernandez hadn't just disappeared with Julian. He had erased his name from society. He stole a future. He altered the past. And for 13 years he fooled every system, every school, and everyone who ever saw them. And when agents arrested him in 2015, Bobby quietly confessed. No drama, no protest. Just a tired man with tired eyes saying, "I did it for my son." But what kind of love hides a child from his mother for over a decade? What kind of father kidnaps to protect, or was it to control? At the heart of this story is a boy now forced to reconcile the two halves of his life. One half, a loving father figure who made his lunch and helped him with math. The other, a man who lied every single day for 13 years, who cut Julian off from his mother, his name, his history. When Julian finally learned the truth, he was crushed. He had no memory of being taken, no memory of Alabama, no memory of his real mother. And now he had to make a choice: reunite with the mother who never stopped looking, or protect the father who raised him. And when Bobby stood trial, Julian made an unexpected plea to the judge. "Please show mercy. I forgive him." The courtroom fell silent. Some called him brainwashed. Others called him mature beyond his years. But Julian wasn't interested in opinions. He was interested in peace. A peace that had been denied to him for 13 years. The courtroom was cold. Not in temperature, but in tension. At the front stood Bobby Hernandez, 53 years old, in handcuffs. Quiet, gaunt, eyes fixed forward. To the left sat Julian, now an adult, no longer missing, but far from found. This was not just a criminal hearing, it was a collision of identities. A boy pulled in two directions, one rooted in biological truth, the other in lived experience. A mother demanding justice, and a son torn between truth and loyalty. Bobby faced multiple charges: custodial interference, tampering with records, forgery, abduction, and every count was stacked with 13 years of weight. The prosecutors painted Bobby as a manipulator, a man who kidnapped his own son, forged documents, and knowingly deceived every institution that came across their lives. They showed how he created fake social security cards, registered Julian under aliases, and dodged the law for over a decade, all while living in plain sight. They revealed how Bobby had manipulated the system, using Julian's innocence as a shield. Not once did he reach out to the boy's mother. Not once did he allow Julian to question the world he lived in. Because for Bobby, control was everything. But then came Julian's letter. He didn't testify in person. Instead, he wrote a 2-page statement addressed directly to the judge. And when the courtroom clerk read it aloud, the room changed. "I just want to move on. I want to live a normal life. Please don't punish him harshly. He raised me. He did what he thought was best. I forgive him." Forgiveness. Not justice. Not vengeance. Forgiveness. It shocked everyone. Even Bobby, sitting motionless beside his attorney, blinked as if for the first time since his arrest. But while Julian pleaded for leniency, the law had to respond. Because forgiveness doesn't erase crime. And Bobby hadn't just stolen a child, he had forged documents, lied to officials, and evaded justice for 13 years. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison. Some said it was too light. Others said it was too heavy. But for Julian, it was final. Closure. The last chapter of a book he never meant to write. After sentencing, Julian stepped outside, surrounded by media. He didn't say much, just one sentence, barely above a whisper: "I still don't know who I am." Because the truth is, when you're taken at 5 years old, there's no full recovery. There are just fragments, echoes of memories that may or may not be real. A face in the mirror that feels like yours, but carries someone else's past. 13 years. That's how long Julian Hernandez's mother, Deborah Skelton, waited. Waited for a phone call. Waited for a knock at the door. Waited for a glimpse of her son's face in a crowd, a store, or a blurry news segment. From the moment he vanished in 2002, Deborah's life became a cycle of grief and determination. Posters went up. Flyers were handed out. She joined forums, contacted investigators, and prayed through the nights. She knew it was his father who took him. But Bobby had disappeared like smoke, changing names, forging IDs, always one step ahead of every search. And then in 2015, the call came. Julian has been found. For any parent, this would be the moment to fall to their knees in joy. But for Deborah, it wasn't that simple. Julian didn't remember her. He didn't know her. The boy she had cradled, fed, bathed, had grown up under a different name, in a different city, believing a different story. He hadn't just been taken, he'd been rewritten. Deborah's reunion wasn't marked by open arms or shared tears. It was marked by distance, both physical and emotional. Julian didn't immediately want contact, not out of hate, but confusion. And how could she blame him? He was 18, with a full childhood behind him, one that didn't include her. His version of the past clashed violently with the truth. And now, here was this woman, claiming to be his mother, after 13 silent years. Still, Deborah never lashed out. She didn't blame him. She didn't beg. She simply waited, again, hoping that one day he'd remember, or maybe not remember, but accept that she was real, that her pain had been real, that her loss had echoed in every room of her home for over a decade. Behind closed doors, Deborah shared this with reporters. He may not know me right now, but I know him. He's my son, and I'll love him whether he calls me or not. There's a special kind of heartbreak in loving someone who doesn't remember loving you back, and Deborah carried that heartbreak with grace. Over time, reports say Julian made efforts to slowly open lines of communication, but it was a long road, one with no guarantees, no fairy tale ending. And perhaps that's what makes this story even more powerful. It's not the tearful reunion. It's the complicated, messy, deeply human aftermath of a crime that didn't end with sirens. It ended with questions. Questions about identity, about forgiveness, about whether love is strong enough to rebuild a bridge when half of it was built on lies. Julian Hernandez stepped into adulthood not just as a college applicant, but as a survivor of a stolen life. When the courtroom emptied, when reporters packed their cameras, when the headlines faded, Julian was left with a question no one could answer for him: what now? There was no roadmap for healing from a life that wasn't truly yours, no support group for young adults discovering they were once the subject of Amber Alerts, no instructions for how to suddenly reintroduce yourself to a mother you can't remember, or how to forgive a father who gave you love but built it on abduction. The world watched Julian's case unfold like a drama, but when the credits rolled, he was still left in the quiet. Reports indicate Julian chose to remain private after the trial. He changed his contact information, avoided media interviews, and largely stayed away from social media. And who could blame him? He wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in peace. As for Bobby Hernandez, he served 4 years in prison. Upon release, he was reportedly prohibited from contacting Julian without permission, a painful irony, considering he once rearranged Julian's entire world without asking. And Deborah, Julian's mother, she remains in Alabama, still quietly hoping her son will reach out again, still leaving the porch light on. She's not angry, she's waiting, with love that never timed out. But beyond the personal, Julian's story sparked something bigger. His case became a case study, used in law enforcement training about long-term parental abductions. It reminded investigators, teachers, counselors, and social workers that not all kidnappings look like men in dark vans. Sometimes, the abductor is the other parent. Sometimes, the child doesn't even know they're missing. And sometimes, justice comes not with rescue squads, but with a college application and a quiet red flag. Julian's story also reignited conversations about how systems fail and succeed, how a decades-old error can remain hidden, how records can be forged, how society forgets the missing when the search goes cold. But the truth? Julian Hernandez was never cold. He was just hidden, tucked behind false names, fake documents, and a man who convinced the world he was a regular dad, until one small detail cracked it open. So what becomes of a stolen childhood? For Julian, it becomes a life rebuilt in pieces. Not every question gets answered, not every scar disappeared. But through the wreckage, a young man found the strength to define his future, not by the lies told to him, but by the truth he chose to live in. If this story moved you, don't let it fade here. Share it, discuss it, honor the millions of children who are still missing, and the parents who never stopped searching. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We have more deeply human, unsolved, and unexpected cases to explore in the next video. Together, let's keep telling the stories the world forgets, and the people who refuse to be forgotten.